One of the things that you've been really helpful in talking about is how if you care about Ukrainians, you should want a solution to this war.
And it's the most important question, really, because, how easy is it to go out and condemn Russia, denounce Putin, especially here in the United States? I mean, yeah, you'll be, patted on the back or patted on the head and say, good job, you denounced evil too. Meanwhile, it's not even just Putin. The entire Russian people are being the victims of collective punishment. All things Russian are being vilified and demonized. But if you care about Ukrainians, you would think like, one, first and foremost, how can this war end? Will condemning Putin in the streets of Washington, D.C. or New York City help bring this war to an end? And the answer, of course, is no. But we, the people of the United States, could demand that the government that speaks in our name actually do the thing that it refused to do before, which is to sit down and seriously negotiate with Russia. Back in December, when Putin said very openly, we have red lines. The red line, the most important red line, is you can't use Ukraine, which was the second biggest republic in the Soviet Union, which has a 1,200-mile long border with us. You can't use that area to put advanced nuclear and conventional missiles with a flight time of 6 minutes to the Russian targets. We're not going to let you do that. So let's negotiate an agreement whereby Ukraine won't come into NATO and Ukraine won't be a staging ground. To which Biden and Blinken and Jake Sullivan and all of them said, who are you, Russia, to tell us who can join NATO or who can't? And who are you to tell Ukraine which alliance they can join or not? Now, frankly, if you want peace and if you care about Ukrainians, you would have to say, look, the Russians are saying to the Americans and to NATO to do something that the Americans would insist upon if Russia placed advanced missiles targeting our cities at the US-Canadian or US-Mexican border. And we could go back to the negotiating table right now, we, meaning the government that speaks in our name, and offer an earnest, good faith negotiation to do just that. And that would actually end this war. But posturing, putting on sanctions, saying that Putin can't remain in power, that's not going to stop Russia. Russia's not going to fold its arms and say, oh, uncle, now we heard you, Joe, our knees are trembling and we're going to stop. No, the way to stop the war, and if you care about Ukrainians, that should be first and foremost, is go back to the negotiating table.
Right. And that is, I guess, people love saying that this is capitulation. People love comparing them. One of the scariest things to see is how freely people are just and casually comparing Putin to Hitler. Not even comparing, actually saying that Putin is worse than Hitler. The latest one who did that was Lloyd Blankfein, who said, at least he didn't use chemical weapons against his people, which is something that Sean Spicer had to apologize for when he said that comparing Hitler to Assad. But I don't think I don't think anyone has to apologize for anything as long as they're attacking Putin. All bets are off. You just kind of get blanket immunity.
Yeah, I've been an anti-war organizer for multiple decades, and I have to say, at each and every time when the U.S. decides to take out another government, launch another invasion, carry out another occupation, in each and every time, the U.S. is fighting the Hitler, the new Hitler, the new iteration of Hitler. And, 100 years ago, when imperialist colonial powers invaded third world countries and removed their leaders and stole their resources, they didn't have to give it some noble cause. They didn't have to say, we're trying to save civilian lives, or we're going to protect the world from weapons of mass destruction, or any of these rationales. They just did it because they could. But in modern era, in 2021, 2022, in the era that we live in order to carry out aggression, or in this case, to manipulate a foreign policy crisis, as the Biden administration deliberately did with the intent of provoking a military operation, which I believe was their goal, they have to assign a noble cause, because the American people won't say, yes, we're going to go destroy other people and overthrow their governments just because we want to. Now you have to assign it some morally justified ethical cause. And that's what we see happening here. Again, I played on my show Katie, over and over again, clips from Anthony Blinken in the last 3 months when they were like sort of sanguinely, benignly, calmly predicting that the Russians will invade after Putin had made it clear that, they want serious negotiations, but if they don't get them, they have this plan B, amassing all of these troops. There was never a sense of alarm in Anthony Blinken's voice. He wasn't like, that's why we must urgently find a way to do this. He'd say, well, look, if they don't invade, fine. If they do invade, we're ready. It was that kind of calmness. And I think the US actually really wanted Russia to carry out a military operation. And I think the Russian calculation was that Zelensky and the Ukrainian military would collapse quickly and that Russia could, change the facts on the ground, so to speak, in a couple of days and have a government that would, assert and conform to the idea of neutrality. And that's what the Russian miscalculation was. They came into the country not really with a shock and awe type military strategy, the way the US basically dropped tens of thousands of bombs and missiles on Iraq starting March 19th, 2003, to shock and awe them. The Russian idea, the Russian military plan, was to come in with a relatively light touch. They expected the Ukrainian military to collapse. They'd create a new government in Ukraine, and they would accomplish through military means what the US would not agree to at the negotiating table. And obviously, that did not happen. The resistance to Russia is stiff. There's a lot of people dying. And if you look at the news accounts from the last 2 days, the American government is now planning for, and I think hoping for, a war that will stretch into at least next summer, because they have Russia basically where they want Russia. They've evicted Russia from the world economy. Russia and China were identified as the two major countries for the new military doctrine adopted in 2018 by Trump. Major power conflict is now the priority. Well, Russia's in a bad situation. It's evicted from the world economy. It's militarily tied down in Ukraine. America has united the European allies who really didn't want to have their arm twisted by the U.S., meaning Britain, Germany and France in particular. U.S. is quite happy right now. All those crocodile tears for Ukrainians, they're happy. They're very happy.
We keep seeing people really laying it on very thick. This is going to last for a while. They're really just preparing people for a long, extended, drawn-out war. There's no urgency around any kind of negotiation because I do think, as you're saying, that they think that this is a good position to have Putin in. The United States government seems very happy to kind of like just bleed Ukraine.
And even his comments, Biden's comments to the troops, he said, well, those Ukrainians, they're very heroic. They stood in front of a tank. That clip that you played.
Yeah. But the Ukrainian people have a lot of backbone. They have a lot of guts, and I'm sure you're observing it. And I don't mean just the military, which is we've been trained in since back when Russia moved into in the southeast Ukraine, but also the average citizen. Look at how they're stepping up. Look at how they're stepping up. And you're going to see when you're there, and some of you have been there, you're going to see women, young people standing in the middle in front of a damn tank, just saying, I'm not leaving. I'm holding my ground. They're incredible. But they take a lot of inspiration from us.
The way they're talking about it is like, wow, the Ukrainians are really taking it on the chin. They're very heroic. But again, when you hear them, it's not the kind of, there's nothing that says in their voice or in their message, that's why we have to stop this. We have to find a way to end it. It's really like, that's why we're going to send more weapons. That's why we're going to send more American troops over to Poland and to Latvia and Lithuania and Estonia. Like, that's not the desire to end the war. And that's why I think it's really sad that people on the U.S., not sad, like revealing that people on the U.S. left who really should know better, who recognize that the empire, meaning the U.S. empire, which really does rule the world and has carried out regime change and invasion and invasion and invasion over and over and over again for, since the end of World War II. I mean, that why would we now go along with what's obviously a U.S. government plan when it comes to Ukraine by joining the chorus, which is simple to do, against Russia? And I don't support, again, the Russian invasion of Ukraine. But I think what's needed is to say, look, Lindsey Graham, who's calling for more weapons, or maybe a no-fly zone, he's not the president. He feels he's scoring political points against Biden. But if he were to get his way, if the crescendo demanding Biden do more and more and more actually succeeded in Biden doing more, we will be on the brink of a conflict with the second biggest nuclear power in the world. Right. And if Putin is in a corner and he's already put his forces on nuclear forces on high alert, why should we be sanguine about the prospect that this will just run its course? Wars like this are extremely dynamic. If the United States allows Poland to send, and I believe this will be the plan, by the way, that Poland will move into Western Ukraine and take part of Ukrainian territory, sort of call Russia's bluff. The Ukrainian right-wing Polish government will be able to show that it's standing up to the Russians. If that were to happen and it ends up where the U.S. supplies Poland with weapons that end up shooting down Russian planes and Russia retaliates, Biden is going to be in a corner. Biden's not going to say, wait, hold up, we don't want to have a nuclear war, because that's going to make him look weak in front of right. Lindsey Graham's and the other demagogic things. So he's going to climb the escalation ladder. Like, we are in a very serious, dangerous moment. And it makes me angry, actually, that parts of the left are doing so little because the social pressure against Russia is so great. People don't want to get up and tell the truth about why the U.S. endlessly pushed NATO to the east, rejected Russia's offer to join NATO. Russia asked to join NATO, and the U.S. said, F you. Just like the Soviet Union, by the way, in 1954, offered the United States, the Soviet Union said, look, we're for a reunified Germany, a non-militarized Germany. We'll give up a socialist East Germany. Let us join NATO, and then we can have a European collective security agreement that will avoid and prevent World War III, to which the Eisenhower administration said no, because they didn't want Russia to be in NATO, just like they didn't want it in the 1990s when Putin asked Clinton to join NATO, because then Russia would be treated as an equal, and different parts of Europe, especially Germany and France, would start to gravitate to their partners or potential partners in the Eurasian landmass, meaning they would gravitate to the east, and that would break up U.S. hegemony. So Ukrainians and Ukraine is a pawn in this geostrategic chess game, and the U.S. wants to maintain world hegemony and control over Europe, and they don't give a damn about Ukrainians. Yeah. And that's why I say especially to U.S. leftists, don't be so cowardly. Get out into the streets, organize and agitate with people, explain a difficult issue, oppose a no-fly zone, and demand that the U.S. government actually begin negotiating in earnest with Russia around its legitimate national security concerns.